Saket Modi started safe security out of his college dorm room by hacking websites. Recently, he celebrated his 35th birthday as well as the securing of Series C round of financing for safe security. In this episode, Saket shares some powerful lessons, not just for founders, but for anyone who wants to upskill both their work and life. I definitely learned several lessons and tips that I plan to use in my own life too. Founders, you don't want to miss this one. Saket, it's so wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me. How are you?
Vidya, it's an honor to be with you. You've been a partner through the previous fund you were in, and you've been a supporter. So thank you for doing everything you've done for me and for SAFE. And I want to make this podcast the best one you've ever recorded. So I will try not to disappoint you, and I'm looking forward to having a lot of fun on this chat.
You're so humble, Saket. You've been amazing. I've listened to some of your other podcasts. Saket, so you have had an incredible journey as an entrepreneur. I seriously do not know of any other person who's had a similar background like yours. You started, of all things, a cybersecurity company out of your dorm room in India when you were in your early 20s. You had zero real work experience before that, let alone any cybersecurity experience. And it's a highly successful startup today. So there is so much for me, and I'm sure so many other founders out there to learn from your journey. So I'm so excited to jump in. First things first, I want to start at the very beginning. You could have done a bunch of different things. I mean, when I think about Zuckerberg, obviously you have this thing, I'm sure many things in common with him, but one of the things that you both have done is started a company right out of your college dorm room. Why cybersecurity?
Vidya, first of all, you're very kind. Today what I'm excited to share with your folks is all the mistakes I've made. And I think, that's the best way in which you learn, right? You learn from the mistakes you made, and those teach you the best. So thank you. And thanks for all the generous words. Let's come to your question. Why cybersecurity? From my dorm room. Vidya, out of everything, my own description, what I think of myself, if I were to describe that in 2 words, it's a geek and a nerd. I love that description of myself. Why I'm saying that, what does that mean basically? It basically means somebody who truly enjoys diving deep into things. And that thing can be anything, by the way. So I love diving deep into healthcare, right? How do you dive deep into the right clothes to wear? How do you do it right? How do you do marketing right? How do you do product right? Right now I'm building my own neural networks in writing my own logistical regression and reducing the cost function for trying to build my own neural networks. The reason I say that is the reason I gave you the diversity of, I've always thoroughly enjoyed going very deep into things, right? That's actually the only guilty pleasure of my life, right? I'm very fortunate to do that. I get paid. I actually feel it's almost unfair, but it is what it is. So we'll live with that. That I get paid for doing something I love so much. But going back to your question, I was always somebody who was interested very deeply into computer science. I'm a computer science engineer by background. So the more deeper you go into computer science, the more you understand how systems work. And when you understand at first principles how anything works, you can twist and bend that versus almost anybody else who doesn't really understand anything that work. And by the way, that's called hacking, by the way. So if you look at Oxford Dictionary's definition of hacking, it's almost like if you use a toothbrush to clean the mirror, you hacked the toothbrush because the toothbrush was not designed to clean the mirror, but you used it that way. So when you make something to do that it was not originally designed to do, that's called hacking. And when you go to a website and you make it give you the passwords, will make you see the data which you're not supposed to see, you hacked the website, right? So given I was very highly interested in computer science always, and more than computer science, I mean, early on, I was very passionate about some subjects like mathematics, physics. Those were areas where I was generally very good in my studies. But then there were areas which I was really bad. Chemistry, biology, Hindi, I was born and raised in India. I could not just tolerate that. So one of the easy ways in which I could clear those exams was, hey, if I can hack into the papers, I can do good stuff. So as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Those
Doesn't
were
sound
like early
exactly
days.
like ethical hacking, if I may say so, in some cases. But
It wasn't so much ethical, with a lot of teachers will tell you, but that's where
yep,
you learn. And that's where you
yep,
see that, look, now that I understand how the skill works, how can I use this skill for the betterment of where the world is going, and the world rewards you. And, we've been lucky. So yeah, Vidya, that's the early stages of why I started, going deep is what I love. Computer science was something that I went deep into for a little bit of necessity, but on the other side, I just have been fascinated by the world of how you can augment what you do physically and intellectually thanks to systems. And one thing led to the other. I was fortunate enough to start up back when I was in college. Unlike a lot of people in India, I come from a Marwadi background. So I say I have 2 degrees. I'm a computer science engineer. The second, I'm a Marwadi from Calcutta. And probably the second one is bigger than the first one. The only reason I say that is
that's
because,
a dangerous combination. Oh my goodness.
yeah, it's very rare but dangerous conversation. Absolutely. And when I told my dad that, hey, I'm thinking about doing a startup, what do you think about it, right? And India is, even today, majority of India is middle class, right? So doing a job is the easiest and the safest thing to do. But my dad was an entrepreneur, like a lot of Marwaris. So when I
Hmm.
asked him, his answer back was not yes or no. His answer back was, this is why you were born. Go do it. And it makes a
Love
big,
that.
right? As a 20-year-old, 21-year-old,
Yep,
where forget about resistance. You're like, hey, my dad thinks that's the mission of my life, right? So I
yep.
better do that, right? So one thing led to the other there. And it was a pretty easy decision to say, look, I want to do this. And yeah, we've been lucky.
That's a fantastic story. And I have to say, just before I hit the record button for this podcast, so for the listeners out there, Saket and I were talking about the budget for podcast recording and tools and how you set it all up. And part of me was wondering, wow, here's a guy who's managing budgets in the millions of dollars a year, but he is able to talk about like a few $100s that he's spending on production and what does it take for sprucing it all up. And that's the nerd side of you. I can totally see it spans more than just in cybersecurity. So in the early days, Saket, so it's clear how where your passion for starting a business and where the cybersecurity focus showed up. How did you go about convincing customers in the very beginning, especially when you had no such background in previously? How did you convince them to purchase anything from you? I believe your initial foray was into services. How did you go about that?
Yeah, Vidya, even before customers, what comes is who's building the company with you,
For sure.
right? You get people who are excited, who get involved, etc., etc. Because one thing which I've seen always get rewarded is, like, there are 2 parts to generally building a company, right? You need a solution which makes sense, and then you need to amplify that solution to reach the right people who have that problem, right? That's the solution is generally the product or services, and reaching out is either marketing, sales, etc., etc. I mean, this is what majority of any business is, right? Everything else
Hmm.
is like bells and whistles, important, but that's like 20%. 80% is get the damn offering right, and then have the right mediums to reach out, because having just one doesn't suffice by itself, right?
Yep.
So in the very early days, I still remember, I was still in my campus, in India. I'm a computer science engineer, and I started this in my late 3rd year, early 4th year of my undergrad. And I used to be a cybersecurity trainer. So I was teaching people. I used to go every weekend for a workshop. It was pretty rewarding because, people were thrilled with my workshops because it was live hacking. So to the point where, at that time, what I used to do in today's laws, not at that time, but today's laws can almost be found illegal. But at that time, I was like, hey, let's go to some random websites and hack them in real time. And it was a lot of fun. So a lot of people used to come, and well, I'll not bore you with the details, but the reason why, when we started from there, right, what first came very importantly, the best way to learn is to teach, is what I understood out there. Because I was going to IIT Delhi, IIT Bombay, IIT Kanpur. I came here to the US to UIUC, a ton of, some of the most prestigious universities in the world. And I was teaching how to hack. And they would love to get a 20-year-old, 19-year-old who says, oh, I can hack into cell phones. I can hack into websites. And it's like real hacking. Like, hey, give me a system and I will show you live how to hack into your Wi-Fi. intercept every packet on your Wi-Fi and show you which pictures are being swiped left or right or being swiped on LinkedIn or Yahoo or Gmail, because at that time pictures were not encrypted. That
Mm-hmm.
just sounds like, oh, that sounds very cool. I'd like to get this guy. And he has a 2-day module where every student used to pay like, $10, 1,000 rupees in India, so around $10 for a 2-day workshop where they come with their laptops and I will teach them, hey, I did this. Now this is what you do, A, B, C, D, E, F, and you do it on your system. So for a student to pay $10 for a 2-day workshop, even back then, was a
Yeah.
no-brainer. So I used to get like, 100, 200, 300 students every weekend paying that kind of stuff. So I used to make like a few $1,000s every week back when I was 19 years old. I was like Richie Rich, and I was like, Uncle Scrooge, because I found something that people needed. At the same time, I could go to colleges and, I used to make phone calls and say, hey, do you want this? A lot of them. And every weekend I was doing that. The only reason I said that is more than the money. What was more important at that time is I truly understood the first principles of how cybersecurity works. SQL injections, right? I would actually talk about how do you go into, a website, look at their get and post parameters. How do you intercept that parameter? How do you inject your own query? How do you get errors? How do you read those errors? Like, this is first principles of how real computer science works. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's use a tool, click a button and we'll hack. No, no, no. We'll understand the way the tool works. And that was the big learning from, again, I told you, right? I'm a geek and a nerd. So I really enjoyed that. Because I did that, then when I started a formal company, because I did that in my first, second, third year, just as student and just
Mm-hmm.
going everywhere. It was so much fun. And, who doesn't like hacking, right? I mean, I was there. So then I said, look, I understand how hacking works. And at that time, I remember Yahoo had got breached. LinkedIn had got breached. There was these big breaches in 2012, 13. You will see that super early days. So then I
Mm-hmm.
said, okay, if these biggest tech companies in the world are getting breached, it means there is a gap and people need to protect. And I understand how the hacking works. So I understand how the security also works. So we're going to give ethical hacking services. So that's when I started in 2012. How did I get my first customer? This is where I remember, a good person at that time, which came in like super early angel investor. We were almost bootstrap, but I wanted to start an office in Delhi. And this was a friend of my dad who was an ex-IPS officer. IPS in India is like the bureaucratic services. So it's Indian police service. Generally very, very smart people make it there. So he was like a retired IPS officer, super smart. And I was like a 20-year-old who wants to do a business. Do you ever set up an office? Where do you set up an office? You said in Delhi. Who do you know in Delhi? Nobody. Okay, my dad knew somebody. So I go there. He's like, look, I'm happy to be involved. Seem like you're a smart guy. The first meeting, he said, but I don't understand. Is the hacking real? I said, why don't you go to your website? He goes to his website and I replaced his photo with a different photo. And he was like, holy shit, what just happened? I said, that's hacking. That's real, right? He said, I get it. Okay, this is fine. So I was like, what is a win for you? And he was an entrepreneur. While he was an IPS, he had taken a voluntary retirement a decade before that. So he's like,
Mm-hmm.
look, I would like to be almost like a shareholder of the company as an angel investor. So I'll invest some money. Are you okay with that? I was like, yeah, I don't care I didn't even know the concept of valuation or whatever. So he was like, yeah, okay. He invested like, I think $50,000 or something. And, at that time, we almost gave him 1/3 of the company. This was like super early on, right?
I'm
And,
sure.
and today that
Lucky
thing,
chap.
yeah, that investment today is multi-million dollars, and that's been the best investment he's ever made, obviously. And he's taken secondaries and beyond. So it's been a great source. And I'm very fortunate, just for very clear. I don't think he's lucky. I'm the one who's lucky because he said yes to me. Now, why is that important? He got vested in the company. This is the big learning of mine, Vidya. It's the big learning that how can you get more and more people who say, this is my business? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you're the partner and you can continue to be the largest shareholder, which I am till date, the largest shareholder of the company. But I have so many people who would say, this is my business. In the success of SAFE is my success. So he came on board as an investor, small investor, and that was like a casino money for him. He's a multi-millionaire. For him to put it like, yeah, some kid, I don't even understand this, but you know what? Seems like a smart guy. Maybe he'll do something. So put in some money out there. And then I took that money. We set up a small office. Now we wanted the first customer because you asked. That's why I gave you this background
Yeah.
story. He went to a amazing college in India called FMS for MBA. It's in Delhi. His batchmate was the CEO of Tata Sky, Harit Nagpal. He's still the CEO of Tata Sky. So he called Harit Nagpal to say, hey, I have a new company I've invested in. I want to see if you would be open to talking to this smart chap. And, of course, you have a lot of digital systems. They will hack you with your permission if you allow, and they'll charge you money for that. So I did not get on a call with Harit Nagpal because he's like, yeah, I'm sure we do it. Why don't you talk to my head of cybersecurity? I go there, phone call. I still remember I was in my campus because, there's some moments in your life you remember
Yep.
exactly where you are. I
Yep.
was in my campus.
And you were
We had
talking to Tata of all people, like one of the Tata companies.
Tata Skies, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
I was very clear, I need this deal. I don't care about the amount, right?
Yep.
Because you need to know the referenceability in B2B
Mm-hmm.
is very, very important. So I,
Mm.
I, I get on the call. He said, hey, can you share a proposal? Yes, my CEO, but the ultimate decision is mine. I'm already clogged. He gave me a meeting 2 weeks later, which is all fine. I met him and then he looked at my proposal. Remember, my first principles of cybersecurity was very strong. So I could create a very strong proposal for him. I said, hey, I will charge you 1 lakh rupees. It's a big amount for us. Zero revenue at that time, right? We used to do workshops, but I
Yep.
don't know. So he said, okay, let me review that. He comes back next day. He said, good news, bad news. I said, okay. He said, good news. I think there's a way we can work this out and we can give you the project. I said, very good. Bad news. I don't have budget for this. Okay. What is the budget you have? He said, look, I'll be able to squeeze out 15,000 rupees, which is 85% discount.
Wow.
First order, right? I know it's too much. He started defending it himself. I know it's too much, but look, right now I can't do more than this. I'll do it later. If you can't do it, I would respect it, blah, blah, blah. And within like 10 seconds, I'm like, I'm in. Deal. Right? Said, oh, that was quick. I said, yes, because I want to show you what I'm worth. And in the next scan, we will talk about the thing because it's a one-time thing. I'm doing this for you. Said, that's fine. We did the scan. We found out crazy things he had never expected. We did a better job than what all his existing vendors were able to do. And then next time he came and the cost went up. And at one point we were looking at pretty much most of the cybersecurity of Tata Sky as a services company. And then we
Mm-hmm.
pivoted. But the only reason I gave you the whole background is that,
Mm-hmm.
look, few learning points. First principles to get the first customer. If you don't understand the real problem and you have a real solution, either as a service or a product, don't even waste time finding customers. Because what's the point of trying to get customers till the time you don't understand the problem and the solution? Now, it's a chicken and egg because to get to the real problem and real solution, you need to talk to people who understand that and
Yep.
do that. But that's fine to not make money at that time. That's a design
Mm-hmm.
partnership. We still do that at Safe. So
Mm-hmm.
first thing, you really need to know your space very well.
Yep.
Secondly, if you don't know people, get people who know people and start by giving. So even till date, right? He was a very rich man, so he could put in some money. I've met so many people, professors from MIT, Stanford, a lot of times, where they'll be professors, and I'm like, hey, I need your help. I need your time. Don't invest any money. Here is 0.2% of my company. Here's 0.3% of my company. And I've had professors who've been shocked. It's like, really? I mean, I don't need to pay anything. Like, yeah, I just need your time because I genuinely value what you bring on the table. Now, you don't obviously go, distributing that, but that's why I have a long list of advisors, arguably the best on the planet for each function. And you start by giving. Don't start by asking because anybody who's worth advice, there are too many people asking for advice. So start by giving and then you earn the right for 1 call a week, 1 call a fortnight, whatever. So that's the second piece. That's what I got my first angel investor. And he opened his Rolodex because now this was his company. He was a shareholder. And the third piece is early customers are not about revenue. Revenue is a lagging indicator. It's not a lead indicator. Lead indicator is, do you have a real problem understanding and do you have a real solution? Sorry, very long answer, Vidya, but that's
Please
how
don't be
early stage.
sorry. I mean, these are, I wanted to say gems, but it's precious. What you're sharing is very precious. And I think the world will benefit from that in such big ways. Because, a lot of founders, even early stage founders, in my view, they jump too quickly to the solution right? And then you end up in competitive landscape and all of that. Well, there is a time for that, but you can't have a solid foundation of a product or a business without really honing in on the problem. And the things that you shared about advisors, give first and then take or ask, I mean, these are human principles to live by beyond just business. So I'm just incredibly grateful of how you very nicely mentioned the story and you're synthesizing it for all of us.
Just one
So
last point on the
please.
love that so much. One of the simple litmus tests, because what happens today is Vidya, a lot of very early stage companies come to me. They come to me for advice to say, hey, I'm thinking about scaling up. What do I do for go to market? What do I do with channels? What do I do? All the sort of questions, right? My simple answer, especially for early stage companies, is do you have a product with a few customers? They say, yeah, I have 3 customers, I have 1 customer, I have 5 customers, whatever, generally. Because you start thinking sales and go to market after you have the first 3, 5, 10 customers, whatever. My simple question to them, a simple litmus test is, if you told your customers tomorrow that I'm switching off the product, will your customer beg you to not be able to do that? If you don't have 5 customers like that, which will tell you that my survival depends on you, you are not ready for scaling up. So it's a very, very simple litmus test that you have 5 customers. I don't care about the revenue they pay. Because what I'm trying to do in that is you have now come in the workflow of what the customer perceives valuable. At the moment you do that, that is when you start thinking about now how do I go from 5 to 25 customers? Getting 5 customers is not important. Getting 5 customers which will say, I cannot survive without you, is what I personally have seen as a good litmus test that people should be thinking, at least enterprise B2B software, because that's the only world I know about. Everything outside that, I'm a total bozo. So I will only keep telling you about all the mistakes I've made in this space. So that's the big, simple litmus test to say 5 customers who will beg you, who will go to the point of saying, hey, I'll acquire you if you shut it down, but I can't survive without you. Till the time that's not the case, don't even think about sales. It's a waste of time, money, effort, energy, everything.
I love that. That's also another one of those very, very valuable lessons. And I think that's also a good segue into SAFE. But before we jump into what is safe security and all that today, you had an amazing run as a services company before SAFE became what it is today. So you transitioned that incredible services company that you started building out of your college dorm room, doing ethical hacking and stuff. And then you decided to pivot to being a product company. There are very few companies on the planet that do that and are able to survive, much less thrive like you are. Along the way, I'm sure not everything was up and to the right. So for the benefit of all of us, what are some things that you did and some things that you wish you had done differently in that journey from being a services company to a product company?
Yeah, great question there, Vidya. So a couple of points there. The first piece, I'll tell you something very similar between a services and a product company. And then I'll talk to you about the differences and, what we could have done, the mistakes we made. Something similar, which I see in both the cases. Obsession with customers. That does not change. Whether you want to build the right services or products, generally I've seen services companies are actually more obsessed with customers. They're more intimate with the customers because you're practically delivering them word by word what they're asking.
You
That's
don't
the
have a
power of
choice.
services, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
because you're molding everything. You're like,
Yep.
what do you do as services? Whatever you ask. That's literally what most, if not all, service companies
For
are
sure.
all about, right? So you're
Yep.
very close to the customer, right? That's something which is very, very similar to products. And if you don't learn that, right, that's what I learned as a services company, right? Really listening hard to your customers, understanding the why behind what they do, and doing that at scale is where the product comes into benefit because you don't need to scale with human beings. So that's one side, Vidya, which is purely, I think that's common. I think if you're not customer obsessed, it doesn't work. The difference is that you see human knowledge, right? And the way we think and do things, right? With all the greatness of agentic AI, right? And with all the excitements, right? I was reading a article just yesterday, I think it was a McKinsey article, which says more than 95% of agentic AI initiatives are actually now failing. The only reason, I'm a big believer of AI, by the way, so no mistakes to say that, it is fundamentally changing the way we, live, play, work, and learn. But there's one but. assuming that anything that you design in the system will be at the same sophistication of the awareness of context, the awareness of what really goes on beyond zeros and ones, beyond
Mm-hmm.
black and white, right? That's a very difficult problem to solve. And therefore, building something which is scalable on systems, which is not going to be totally, flexible. And the more
Mm-hmm.
flexibility you give, it's a chicken and egg kind of a thing which is out there, right? Because more
Mm-hmm.
choices is not always better. It's like less but better is generally better. That is a fundamental shift in mindset, which I think a lot of people don't think or are not able to, cross the chasm with. Start as a product company, you're only thinking systems and design and what's scalable. But you're almost like, hey, I was solving customer by customer. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, how do we solve it in a group to say I'll solve
Mm-hmm.
20, 50, 100 customers together? That is fundamentally different because that means you will not be everything to everybody. In
Mm.
services, you can be everything to everybody, at least in the
Yep.
domain that you're in, based on what you're saying. Here, you have to be so perfect in your design, not just the design of how it looks, but the design of how it works. That is what I think a lot of services companies miss out on because they either make it too flexible. I'll give you something
Mm-hmm.
stupid I did. When I started the product in 2020, we launched the product. What do you do as a services company? You try to cater to every customer request which is there. I remember it was, we used to have a product where it's like customers used to say, hey, do you host on cloud or do you host on-prem? What do you give as an answer as a good customer obsessed company? Of course I do both, right? I'll do everything you want. It's an easy lift and shift, right? You
Yep.
build something on servers and you lift and shift that on an EC2 instance in AWS. So I can in theory do both. I still remember talking to an investor. This was actually Ashim Chandna at Greylock, and he gave me an example of two companies. This was back in 2021 when we were raising our Series A investment. He said, Saket, I invest in Okta, I invest in Pure Storage, and it was a very clear example of something which is on-prem versus something which is totally on cloud. The
Mm-hmm.
maintain and the multipliers of that, because it's easier to maintain, it's easier to update, 50 advantages to it.
Sure.
It's fundamentally different. So the services mindset is, of course, I will do both. The product mindset is, when I had that call, I remember hanging up that call, writing an email, guys, today is the day when we decide we'll be 100% cloud-based, 100% SaaS. And SaaS doesn't mean EC2 instances. In fact, today we run 0 EC2 instances because we're truly cloud native. We use a ton of, cloud native services, and we truly built a product with multi-tenant after 2021. And it was the best decision, one of the best decisions we've taken. But that's very different, right? It's not
Yep.
saying yes to the customer. I still remember that week we won a $3 million deal for a company which was less than 1 million in ARR, 3 million over 3 years deal with State Bank of India. And I said no to
Wow.
that because, and this was after 48 visits to State Bank of India. 48 with, I used to count because it was crazy to work with them to get there because they were giving us a deal without an RFP. And to do that for a PSU in India, it's crazy. And we went through the whole process. After 48 visits, getting the LOI that yes, it's done. The only requirement was it has to be hosted on-prem in State Bank of India. I said, sorry guys, we'll not do this. And that's like, whoa, hold on. What just happened? And
Wow.
yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah.
giving examples so that, it's not just
Yeah.
theory, you actually
Yeah.
see, and it was the best decision ever. Like today we are at tens of millions of dollars of ARR. That customer, it's not just about State Bank of India. It's about any on-prem customer would have pulled us
Mm-hmm.
down. So those are tough decisions that you have to take as a product company that is very different in DNA than a services company. But you have to put your foot down.
Yeah.
I didn't get everything right, but I think I got 51 out of 100 at least right. So, we've been lucky and we've been doing well with you.
Yeah, that's I mean, I guess it's easy to say that the answer is don't say yes to everything, but in practice, when you are a Series A company getting a $3 million potential booking, that
3 years. Yeah.
over 3 years, I mean, that could have been
Game
life
changer.
changing. Say not knowing what the next deal is going to be and how big that is going to be, that's always a hard thing as a founder. But that's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. So let's jump into today. So just a few weeks ago, there are two big milestones that you've had, one personal and one professional. Obviously, you closed your series round and there was a Series C, and that there was an announcement on that. And you also turned 35. Amazing. Two big milestones. So tell us a little bit about safe security and where it is today. You have several products. What is a flagship product? Who is it for? And why should the world care?
Certainly, Vidya. Thanks for the wishes, birthday wishes. Yes, we made the announcement. It was totally coincidental that the press release happened on that day. It was, of course, not planned by me. Some perks
Well,
you
I
get as
mean,
a founder and CEO.
for people who do hacking for a living, I'm not sure I buy that entirely, but that's okay.
Yes, yeah, it somehow happened.
Yeah.
Coming back to your question, but what we do today, Vidya, is we're solving a fundamental, very simple problem. Like, without getting into jargons of the market and things around that, it's a very simple problem we're solving. The world's three largest cybersecurity companies, Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, Zscaler, phenomenal companies. They have one simple problem. And a simple problem is, if you find me a Fortune 500 CISO is Chief Information Security Officer, right? If you find one CISO which tells me I log into Palo Alto Networks every day, I log into CrowdStrike every day, how many CISOs would be there like that? Zero. They're phenomenal products, but they are not enabling decision making at the most important persona of cybersecurity, which is the CISO. Because the CISO is the ultimate economic buyer of the $200 billion cybersecurity market. That CISO relies on Deloitte, KPMG. That CISO relies on the head of GRC to put stitch together manual dashboards, spreadsheets to say, hey, where should we invest? Is our program working? What is the ROI of the investments we made last year? I need to go and present to the board. What is the risk we are sitting on? How secure is our supply chain? What is the top prioritization that should happen strategically for our initiatives or tactically for our vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, blah, blah, blah. All of this today is extremely, extremely fragmented. We're solving that problem. It's as simple as that. What we're doing in a very, very simple way, we're a layer of intelligence on top of the $200 billion cybersecurity market. Just for a second, pausing and giving you a perspective in parallel, what the chief revenue officer uses Salesforce for. What does the CRO do with Salesforce? He or she goes to Salesforce every day and takes decisions. Hey, which rep is performing? How much is the pipeline? How well are we doing in our numbers? Should I change somebody's territory? Should I change my account mapping? What is the deal velocity stage by stage? Blah, blah, blah. There's a central cockpit for a chief revenue officer to take decisions on a daily basis. That cockpit is called Salesforce.com. The same is for the CFO, called Oracle NetSuite or an SAP, any ERP solution. Mm-hmm. For a chief HR officer, that's Workday. For a CISO, it's not there. That is what we are building. That how do we build a central cockpit for the top chief security officers, not just top, in fact, for all chief security officers. And when they use it, it's not just for them, it's their whole team. And of course, that needs feeds. We have 150 APIs where we integrate with the Palo Alto Networks and the CrowdStrikes and the Zscalers of the world. We integrate with threat intelligence feeds. We understand the business context. We have almost now 50 GenAI agents, which put all of that into context, run it through our neural networks, and then come out with what is the best next step to take in order to reduce risk in the most efficient way possible. That's what we do for a living. So think of us as a layer of intelligence over and above the entire stack. And we don't do detection. We don't deploy some sensors on your systems or your cloud. We will integrate with the Wiz. We'll integrate with CrowdStrike. We'll integrate with the Qualys. And we'll put all of that together and we'll put the pieces of the puzzle together so that you can see the whole picture and then take decisions of what is in the best interest of your company, whether it's for your own risk or your third-party risk. We do that all. And we have just one product, one platform. The platform has different SKUs. So the SKU, now I'm talking about brass on ground. We do cyber risk quantification as an SKU. We do CTEM, continuous threat exposure management, as an SKU. We do third-party risk management as an SKU. And we'll be adding more and more SKUs which are out there. So that is what we've been doing, Vidya. And yeah, I mean, that's the fundamental problem. We think that it's still not been solved. And we think we have a good shot to solve that in the near future.
Thank you for sharing that, Saket. So I think the analogy that you made is very, very interesting, that people in sales have Salesforce, that sort of thing doesn't exist in cybersecurity. It's very telling. after how many decades of cybersecurity companies solving problems out there, right?
Many decades.
Yeah, yeah. So just getting a little bit deeper into this. Most recently, Forrester published a cyber risk quantification Forrester wave, and I noticed that SAFE is out there in one of the quadrants. Turns out it's the upper right quadrant, and it's at the far right. And there are so many people that are there, but they're very, very far away from SAFE, including the likes of one of the companies you mentioned, Zscaler, KPMG, MasterCard, and all those companies, clearly showing your product leadership. Now, I've noticed that you credit your co-founders, Vidit and Rahul. You credited them with what has helped you get here, but also how they have been helping keep the company innovate and all that. But I'm curious, like as a CEO, I'm sure that the changes that you're seeing today in technology, AI in particular, it requires that employees are constantly up-leveling their skills, using new tools, trying things out just as much as you are. How do you foster that kind of a culture? How do you ensure that people are not stagnating and are not stuck in the ways of
Yeah. Vidya, so just to give you context, right? I think how do you upskill people starts with people, because upskill is a direct function of the quality of people you have, right?
sure.
There's a very nice saying by Vinod Khosla. It says a startup is the people it hires, not the plans it makes, right? So the reason I'm giving that example here is that to the best of my capability, we've been obsessed with talent density within SAFE. Again, to give you some numbers, when Sorensen, your previous company, led my Series B back in 2023, we were around 200 people. Today, we just did our Series C. Today, when I say a few weeks back, our revenue is up almost 6x in the last 2 years, from Series B to Series C. So the revenue went up 6x. And during Series B, we were 200 people. Today, we are 190 people, right? So if you think about it, right, that how does that happen? Like, how does revenue go up 6 times while the headcount actually, in theory, 5% decreased, right? Only for one reason, right? This is where you keep the bar of performance, of density, of the kind of people that come in very, 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 very high, right? And because if I have to spoon feed people, I've always seen this, right? If I have to tell somebody, hey, go and learn something. Hey, you're allowed to take this leave. You should do this. This is our expense policy. That means I've hired the wrong person.
Yep.
People are, for example, right now, Vidya, I wanted to truly deep dive into AI agents and machine learning and, LLMs, right? I've been doing for 6 months, something what I did. I picked out a PhD candidate on machine learning and LLMs from IISc Bangalore. He is my tutor and he teaches me 2 classes every week. I've given him a small internship. So of course, I pay him a nice stipend, which is more than those 2 hours a week. I pay him more than what he makes in the full month as a teaching assistant in IISc Bangalore. So he's happy. So start by giving, just be fair first. So start from there. Now this guy creates dedicated lectures that he takes for me one-on-one. We have built using Python my own logistical regression where I'm optimizing for the cost function, building my own stuff which is out there, right? We're using LangChain to go ahead and see how do you put data into the context window and how does the LLMs work, right? With my own hands. Now, who asked me to understand the first principles of how transformers work? What is a softmax? How does, RNN and CNN work, right? Nobody asked me for that. But I felt that if I have to build something on that, it's the right thing to do. And I want to learn. And the way I can learn is not just by looking at videos. Of course, I've seen a ton of Andrew Ng's videos obviously on deeplearning.ai. I think all of us do that. But I have a lot of doubts. Who solves the doubts? AI is not good enough. I've tried that. I don't get personalized answer the way I want. So I picked up a student who said, I'm happy to help you. It's a win for him. It's a win for me. And he's a teaching assistant there. So he's already doing his PhD while being a teaching assistant. So it's truly a win-win for everybody. And I just said, hey, dude, my schedule will be crazy. So it'll never be like, okay, Wednesday at this time only I'll meet. Sometimes I'm in every week I'm in a different city, right? So I get that flexibility. And it's still a few, literally it's like few $100s a month. He's super happy with that. I'm super happy with that. So I'm just trying to give you that perspective. So I'm upskilling myself, but nobody told me that. I think everybody in SAFE is at least equal to how smart I am. A lot of them are way smarter than I am. So if nobody is to tell me that I have to upskill myself when I have to, who am I to go and tell them, do you have to upskill yourself? But what I will tell them is where do we have to go and how fast we have to go there. And if you can't keep up with that pace, TAFE is not the place for you. So,
I
so
love that.
that is a very simple, way. And by the way, for that, what I do for high talent density, if you look at the benchmark of how much we pay, Vidya, we are in the 90th percentile. Like an engineer in India, the base salary, for example, in India that we pay for our
Hmm.
engineers, the starting salary is 30 lakh rupees a year. It's the highest of the highest. McKinsey doesn't pay that. Uber doesn't pay that. Amazon doesn't pay that. Flipkart doesn't pay that in India. Similarly, in
Hmm.
the US, it's mostly around that 90 percentile. So I will hire less people, pay them like crazy, which is at the 90th percentile. I'll not hire a lot of people. So I'm not fiscally irresponsible. So if you hire a lot
Hmm.
of people with a lot of stuff, as I gave you the number, right? My headcount
Yep.
actually slightly shrunk while my revenue went up 6 times in the last 2 years. So when that is the case, it makes it frugal. Now, when you're being paid super high, there's no concept of work-life balance is safe. We're working on Saturdays, Sundays. Right now, there's a project I'm running with my engineering. The entire tech leads and every engineering, we meet every 12 hours. Every 12 hours, there's a stand-up, right? So there's a 10 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. And 10 p.m. Eastern. There's a stand-up with my whole leadership of engineering team, updating epic by epic what's the status of this and how things are going, right? And every 12 hours. And if I need to do more, I'm then sitting in India on the head of my engineers to say, guys, nobody's leaving tonight till the time we deliver that. So I'm just trying to say you have to be fair. Start by giving,
Yep.
give them the right money, give them the right equity. But on the other side, hey, that's a talent. So such people, I don't need to tell them go and upskill yourself.
For
They're
sure.
like, if we don't do that,
And I have to add, you lead by example. I mean, by virtue of putting in the time and effort to invest in learning, which obviously nobody asked you to do. I mean,
yep.
you can just come in and say, build this for me, or build, whatever else
I have a
some
team of
competitor is doing.
AI experts. I have a team of AI ML architects. I absolutely don't need to do that. But again, the geek and nerd in me doesn't feel comfortable. If I go ahead and I'm asking, so I would never ask somebody to do something in safe that I myself would not do. First principles of how do you think about leadership, right? So if I expect somebody to work 16 hours, I'm working 16 and a half hours at least, right? If I'm expecting people to read a book, I've read that book. I've drank that book. So that's just, how I think about that with you.
Yeah, love that leading by example. I know we're running short on time here, so I'm going to squeeze in a few things very quickly. So, one of the things I read in your amazing company blog is about CyberAGI, and you also talk about how SAFE fits into that vision, or why CyberAGI is the vision for SAFE. But I'll let you talk about that, and also I think it's coming together, at least for me, and I'm sure for others who are listening through this too. I can see why SAFE is very well positioned to take to be a leader with all things AI. But I'll let you talk about what's your vision and where is SAFE heading.
Yeah, it's very simple, Vidya. Cyber AGI, cybersecurity plus AGI. We think so. OpenAI, Google, Meta, they're trying to make generic AGI, artificial general intelligence, right? And they have a lot of generic data from the internet, from Reddit, blah, 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 to be able to train their models for that. And very rightfully so. There will be AGIs which will be very, very generic in nature. But in my blog, if you read, and I wrote a blog around when we announced Cyber AGI as a concept, if you think about the smartest person who's walked this planet in the last 100 years, Albert Einstein, right? Albert Einstein was not somebody who knew everything about everybody or could do most things better than most human beings. That's how OpenAI defines AGI. However, what he was really, really good at is physics and maths. So think of him like physics AGI or maths AGI, that within physics and maths, he was like the epitome of where intelligence can go to. We
Hmm.
think that there'll be super specialized AGIs. There'll be healthcare AGI, the most ultimate doctor on the planet, which will promise to you the ultimate promise of healthcare on how do you make you disease free. Then there'll be, physics AGI. Similarly, there'll be cyber AGI. And who will do cyber AGI? AGI, artificial general intelligence, is about a system which can intelligently understand context of the company, of external threat, internal controls, all that's going on, and then make sense out of it and say, okay, this is what you should do. And not only recommend what you should do, but autonomously do a lot of that, which is in the safe zone of, without disrupting anything which is going on. We are still not there, but we think we have a very good shot to be able to build that. And that's what we call a CyberAGI.
Wow, very, very exciting. All the very best to you. I'm pretty sure that the foundation that you have laid already in SAFE and all of the insights that you have, having built SAFE from the ground up for 10 plus years now, I'm sure will serve you well. In closing, Kate, would love to ask you something, maybe fun that maybe, we can talk about. Do you have any favorite books or movies, anything that you want to share?
Yeah, Vidya, I've always been fascinated not by books, but by the author of the books. And let me double click what I mean by that, right? So I always look at okay, people write self-help book, but has the person's own life been self-helped or not? What that means in a simple way is, right? Like instead of reading Bhagavad Gita, I would first understand the man who spoke Bhagavad Gita. It looks like his life is really good and he could do the right things. That is what gets me interested into the book. Generally, when you read into the lives of people, you get so excited about it. Generally, the book is like a small part of the grandeur of the person. Now, keep this in mind. This is for non-fiction. I don't read fiction books. So that's totally like J.K. Rowling. You can't think what she will make Harry Potter by reading the life of J.K. Rowling. Of course not.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about non-fiction right now because I don't read a lot of fiction. I'm geek and a nerd that way. So, I love music though. I love playing the piano and other things, but not so much into fiction books. But coming back to anything which is, so I spend 6 to 9 months every year reading about what I call as cool dudes. So these cool dudes can be Albert Einstein. It can be Prophet Muhammad. It can be Kabir. It can be Krishna. It can be Lord Shiva. It can be anybody, doesn't matter. And then I would go very deep into their lives. It's a high of my life. That's, when I'm not doing SAFE, that's like, wow, I'm looking forward to doing that. And, I had to learn Sanskrit because there's a lot of stuff that's written in Sanskrit and I had to learn a little bit. I'm not an expert at that, but, I want to get from the source rather than having 2 layers of translation because obviously, a lot of context gets missed out there.
You are a true nerd. Nerd's nerd, Saket. So what is your favorite, what's the one author or book that you are either recently going into or one that you want to share?
No, I think because I'm guessing most of your audience will be entrepreneurs. I think what would be very interesting is when I deep dive into the life of Peter Thiel, I think that's a very, very interesting person to learn a lot about startups from. It's very contrary. In fact, he has a book called The Contrarian, and it's very unlike what you would think, right? And it just pushes you to think in a very different way. And I think if out of all people, of course, there's too many recommendations because it depends on what stage of life you are at and what you're doing.
Yep.
Of course, there'll
100%.
be a I recommend you. But since I'm guessing a lot of your folks will be early stage entrepreneurs listening to this, I think one person who you definitely want to learn from is Peter Thiel, 0 to 1, The Contrarian. Just read all the stuff that he writes in the blogs that he has. I don't agree with everything he says, but just the sheer way of pushing you beyond what the norm of thinking. I think that ability is what creates great entrepreneurs. Because if you do what everybody's thinking, you're
like everyone else. Yeah, 100%. I love that. This is a fantastic way to also end this recording. Saket, I am sure that this was the best for me in terms of how much I learned. You talk about density. I think, I haven't spent 1 hour in a long time where I've packed so much learning for myself. I'm sure and I hope that the people listening to it will also feel the same. Thank you so much, Saket. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks, and wonderful to be on your show. It's an honor. Thank you, Vidya, and friends for life. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.